Also back then when Enduro was brand new, the first race has been won by Fabian. Now we have the Enduro E. Yeah, first two races, they were also won by Fabian. So maybe this is just the start of something new and something bigger. I remember like my colleague Lorenz at that time, we were doing like a ride out and first time on the bike, 430 chainstay, steep climb, and he was doing like a backflip. Because you were not used to short chainstays on an e-bike at that time. Yeah, so you really needed to adapt your riding accordingly.
Moritz Ströer, welcome to the Downtime podcast. How's things with you?
Hi, all good. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for the opportunity, Chris. I'm doing great. Weather is fine. Summer finally arrived in Europe. How about you?
Yeah, we've had summer and it seems to have gone. It's been absolutely throwing it down with rain today, but the trails needed it and the garden needed it, so it's all good.
Good for the nature. We don't mind
for a bit of
mud. Yeah.
Exactly. It's all good.
Born dry, but good riding. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go too far, just remind us how you got involved with Canyon in the first place. Just give us a little short background on your career so far.
Yeah. Quite a few times now. So I'm with Canyon for a little more than 8 years. Before that, I've been basically riding bikes my whole life. So starting as a kid, riding mountain bike, riding BMX, then moved from cross country into downhill quite soon. Been doing downhill races on a national European level for many years. Been doing this in parallel also when studying. So the reason why I was studying engineering was basically because I was always into bikes. Yeah, I was thinking about bikes, fiddling around, trying to improve things and stuff. So that's why I went into engineering in the first place. Been in contact in Germany. You came in contact with automotive industry quite early, so tried that during studies. But then, thought why not try bicycle industry? Try it for a few years, and still around. So
good stuff. And what's your current role at Canyon?
Currently, I'm a team manager in the engineering team for mountain bikes. So basically, we have around 10 engineers taking care about all the projects, all the new stuff we're developing here, and try to keep everything together and making sure we are heading in the right direction.
Good stuff. And have you always been involved in the gravity side of things at Canyon? Because we spoke a few years ago when we were talking about the new sender at the time, right?
Yeah, back then, definitely, because it was coming from downhill, from enduro. Gravity is for sure where my heart is. But now I'm also responsible for everything else. So cross-country, definitely a big part of what we do, and endurance mountain biking. So, yeah. A lot of stuff I can still learn from the experts, but that's what keeps it interesting for sure.
Yeah, definitely, it's a big job, man. Well, we're going to be talking about the gravity side of things, and like it feels to me like the perception of e-bikes within the gravity side of mountain biking has changed a lot in the last couple of years. I think it's probably fair to say they weren't really like initially very welcomed into the gravity side of mountain biking. There wasn't a lot of love for e-bikes in the first few years. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you imagine maybe 8 years ago, looking at how e-bikes were looking like, if you meet someone in the forest on an e-bike, they're probably 65 and older. Yeah, so basically none of the, let's say, cool kids, they would think about getting an e-bike back then. So, yeah, I mean, part of the reason was for sure, it's a sport, yeah. So why would you put a motor on a bike? So there was totally, something totally new back then. And to be honest, mountain bikers, they are conservative, yeah. Rather than, thinking about the potential it could actually bring into the sport, they do just see, okay, maybe the products which are available at that time, they were by far not perfect. But, as an engineer working in the industry, you should not be happy with what you have at the moment. You should rather think about, what's the potential? What could we do like in 3, 4, 5 years out of the technology?
Yeah, definitely. What do you think was kind of holding them back in the early days from a technology perspective? Because e-bikes just weren't really, I guess, suited to the more gravity side of riding then?
Yeah. So basically two different aspects, I would say. So one thing is the sheer size of the motors, trying to fit the first generation Bosch engine into an e-bike gravity mountain bike at that time would have been required to have crazy long chainstays. So they had like 480 chainstays on a trail bike. And back then, obviously, we've been trying everything. We've been riding everything what was available. But the handling, it did just not, come up to what we would say would be a good handling of a mountain bike. So that's one thing. And the other thing is definitely the capacity of the battery back then. So the first generations, they had below 500 watt hours for a bike which is 24 kilos and more. Which definitely would have meant at that time probably you could do 90 minutes of riding, but that's it. Yeah. So and then thinking about the money you have to invest, thinking about how heavy the bikes are, which is also not the best for the handling, obviously. The amount of riding time you would get in would for sure be significantly less than what you would have done with automotor.
Yeah. And like you say, you're constantly, I guess, experimenting and looking at what's possible with the technology that's available now. And also, I guess you have a window into the future to some extent with brands like Bosch and Shimano. So you also see what's coming. When did you first start to think that e-bikes were gonna begin to work within the gravity side of things? What was the first sign to you where you were like, hang on a minute, I think we might have something that could work here?
Like what I mentioned before, with just the size of the engines with the motors. So the first one was definitely Shimano with the EP8, significantly reducing the packaging, making it slimmer, therefore allowing us to have some kind of regular chainstay length numbers, which was just not achievable before with the first generation motors. So definitely Shimano, looking at the motor system a little bit from a different perspective, that was for us a game changer.
Yeah, and I guess the Spectral On was like the first bike that you guys did with that EP8 motor. Yeah. Was that like a kind of dipping your toe in the water of e-bikes in the gravity world? Because that bike, I guess, it sort of sits somewhere at the lower end of the gravity side of things, the upper end of like trail riding. It's kind of somewhere between the two fields, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. So that was for sure like in between back then. Like a lot of people inside Canyon, they were not like 100% sure. Is it e-bike? Is it actually a thing for us? Yeah, because Canyon, it's a sportive brand. So we are not targeting now we are. So for mountain bike, we are not targeting the commuter and the casual riders, but we want sportive mountain bikes. Back then, have the Spectral as kind of a do-it-all mountain bike, also gravity orientated in terms of geometry numbers. Definitely, that was the first bike where we would say, if we do an e-bike, this should be the first one. Actually, interesting story back then. There was also one of the first ones with mullet setup. So,
okay.
The story behind it, we were constantly thinking about, okay, is it actually the right thing to do to have like two same size wheels, front and rear the same? So before that, even we were testing a lot of mullet setups and actually came to the conclusion that it's the better setup, not only for mountain bikes, but for e-bikes, but also for mountain bikes. But then the UCI was holding us back with the rule that it's not allowed to have two different wheel sizes. And back then, obviously, e-bikes were way too far away for the UCI to have a reglement for that. So we said, okay, if we can try it somewhere, then we can do it somewhere where there's no UCI regulation, which would hold us back. So that was actually also our first mountain bike at that time.
Interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah, and that bike obviously was popular not in the market, but also within Canyon. I think it got a lot of you thinking about, okay, well, this is a really good start, but like, what could we do from here? And is that was like the founding father, I guess, of the Torque On, which came later in an aluminium version?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, if you do a project for first time, if you do a bike for first time, e-bike for first time, then you do learn a lot of things. Back then, Spectral On was also external battery, which was kind of popular at that time. Then we were transferring everything to internal battery, had a successor of the Torque On in the making. So basically before we, finalize the design, we did try a lot of things with test mule bikes. So we did have several test mules for the Spectral On, but we also did have test mules for the Torque On. So I think very, very early we had, let's say, a very progressive e-mountain bike, 180 millimeter travel front and rear geometry, which was more or less the same as a traditional bike. And we're learning a lot about how should kinematics look like, how should geometry look like for a mountain bike, for e-mountain bike, because there are definitely differences here. You need to think about. Cannot just transfer one thing to the other. You cannot just take a mountain bike design, put a motor on, and that's it. But I think we just learned it by doing exactly this. Yeah, so we were always complaining about geometry numbers of e-bikes, super long chainstays, and then we just build a bike with the same geometry as a non-motorized bike. Yeah. And then obviously the climbing, I remember like my colleague Lorenz at that time, we were doing like a ride out, and first time on the bike, 430 chainstay, steep climb, and he was doing like a backflip. Because you were not used to short chainstays on an e-bike at that time. Yeah, so you really needed to adapt your riding accordingly.
Definitely. Yeah, you talk about the kinematic. I think that's an interesting thing to maybe talk a bit more about. It's something that on paper, I guess you'd be like, well, why would it not be the same e-bike to non-e-bike? But there's various things that you can do with an e-bike, or you'd want to do with an e-bike, that drive some differences. Can you tell us a little bit about how, for maybe on something like, I don't know, the Strive or the Torque, like how the non-e-bike kinematic and the e-bike kinematic are different, and why?
Yeah. So for example, there's one significant difference in, let's say, the speed you are riding an e-bike compared to a pedal bike. So when you're pedaling, you're actually never going at constant speed, but you have like a sinus curve. You always accelerate and then you go slow, accelerate and you go slow. And this is quite significant as long as you do not have a motor. So once you have a motor in the system, you do not only have the very much changing frequency of pedaling from the rider, but you do have a constant torque coming from the motor. So this means you're going at a way more constant speed. You're not accelerating, decelerating, accelerating, decelerating. And if you try to do something like this with your car, like you go on the gas, stop again, yeah. This is when the car is, the chassis is starting to move. Yeah, and this is something you also have on a bike. And you do have it significantly more if you do not have a motor in there. So this means if you look at numbers, people are talking a lot, for example, the anti-spot number. Yeah? So this is basically the kinematics number, which describes like how much do chain forces actually decrease this chassis movement of a bike. Mm-hmm. So this number, for example, would be significantly higher on a regular bike compared to a e-bike. And what does it mean on the other side is, we need less anti-squat on the e-bike. So this means we can also decrease the amount of pedal kickback you would see on the bike. And therefore, we can even increase the suspension performance of the e-bike even more compared to a traditional one without having a negative chassis movement.
Interesting. So you would say that the kinematic on an e-bike is a more desirable kinematic that's enabled by the fact that there's a more constant speed in the way we ride it?
Exactly. There's a more constant speed, and therefore you can actually tune the suspension the way it's even more sensitive, let's say so.
Yeah. Have you ever tried taking that e-bike kinematic and putting it on a non-e-bike to see how detrimental that is?
Definitely, yeah. You can just grab a Canon e-bike, turn the motor off and try to pedal it uphill. So it's possible,
Okay.
but you're gonna notice some significant more suspension bob compared to not having a motor.
Interesting. So I've always sort of thought that the reason for a lower anti-squat on an e-bike was because you had the power. You didn't really care about, any inefficiencies in things, but it's more that you're just at a more constant speed most of the time. So you physically don't need it.
Exactly. Yeah. So the torque, which is actually on the chain ring and on the chain is way more constant than without a motor. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So it feels like, in the last couple of years, like e-bikes have been really pushed forwards. Like there's constant developments, so many brands launching e-bikes. And also now we've got e-enduro racing at the highest level, a World Cup level event. It's been embraced by the UCI and ESO and plenty of other events worldwide. Do you feel that's really making a big difference to this segment? Is it driving things forward in a certain direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's still very early. And I think there was very, very big changes looking at the first World Cups, let's say so, which were, more like a cross-country format. And now having the EWS and the UCI merging, and now we have a enduro race format, which is basically, it's enduro racing on the highest level, just mixed up with some super technical climbing. And just having those two different formats, looking from one year to the other, it did change dramatically. And I think with every product, the racing is inspiring, and it's driving development into a certain direction. And definitely, there's going to be, I think, super interesting things to come. Still, it's very, very early. It's a small sport. Still a little bit niche. Maybe you can compare it to like the early days of enduro. Also back then when enduro was brand new, the first race has been won by Fabien. Now we have the Enduro E. First two races, they were also won by Fabien. So maybe this is just the start of something new and something bigger.
Interesting. Are you seeing that like trickle through into demand yet? Do you say? I guess it's kind of hard to separate that, but I'm guessing that there's more and more demand for bikes in this sector.
Yeah. So definitely with e-bikes, you can go uphill. It doesn't matter like how much travel you have. You can for sure get a bigger bike without having to compromise the uphill and pedaling performance. So for e-bikes, you see the move. You can just size up a little bit. So if you're basically riding trails, then why not get an enduro? So if you ride enduro trails, you can potentially look into getting a freeride e-bike, or let's say the downhill bike with the motor. So you see, people getting bigger bikes and therefore probably also feeling more comfortable on the trails, pushing their limits. So all in all, I think it's a good thing for everyone.
Yeah, and I guess the Strive On is your offering for e-enduro racing, right? That's what Fabian's been out on the circuit on, as well as Innes as well, I think.
So Fabian, he actually pushed a lot for this bike. So back then I was explaining, we did a lot with Shimano, and we also had the thinking Shimano is probably offering a little bit more, let's say, natural ride feeling, whereas, if you ride a Bosch, you have plenty of power, super powerful. Or maybe for some mountain biker, maybe a little bit too much. But then again, looking at racing and looking how the format is, you need your power, you need as much power as possible. And this is basically what Bosch is offering. And we said, okay, if we want a competitive bike and we want to be competitive in every racing segment, then we need to have a bike with a Bosch engine, and we need to have a package which is capable to win the races. And I think this is what Fabien he did prove in the first two races. And see, now he's a professional racer again. Hard to talk to him because he's training so much.
Leading the overall and hopefully going to continue, because I think he only planned to race the first round, right?
He was planning to race the first round and then maybe the second. But I think now I didn't speak to him like after the third one, but I think now everyone is pushing him to do the whole series. Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. So yeah, where do you start with something like the Strivon? I guess it is the motor selection is the first big decision you have to make on it. And any e-bike platform, is that fair? Because that's kind of what you're wrapping everything around.
Yeah, to be fair, this is for sure a very big part of it. Yeah, so you can never just look at the motor and then trying to build around a bike. So you would definitely need to look into the whole package. So not only motor, also the battery, HMI interfaces. Do you need to connect it? The functions, does it need to, fit into the? You're also offering an app, yeah. So we're gonna have a ecosystem for all the connectivity devices you have on the bike. So a lot of things you have to consider, yeah. And then at the end, for us, it's always the customer as customer first. So what's good for one customer might not be good for the other one. And that's also the reason why we are not saying, okay, this is the best system. Yeah, you have to use this. But if you look at our portfolio of bikes at the moment, you have a Strive, this is then the race bike. Yeah, so it comes with the Bosch motor, very, very powerful. Then the, let's say, more natural ride feeling you would probably get with the Shimano motor. And also, to be honest, the lighter package. Yeah, so if you look at the Spectral On, it also comes with the in-house developed Canyon battery. So we're able to get a little bit like a bit of packaging.
Yeah, is the Bosch system, is that a closed system? You're limited to using their batteries, etc. Like you have to use all of their stuff. Is that how it works?
Exactly. Yeah. So this is how it works currently with Bosch. Definitely. Yeah. So you get a package, you get a motor, you get a battery, you get a HMI, and then you try to build the bike around it. With some other brands and motor suppliers, you can do it differently. So maybe there's a motor, but you can adjust the, let's say, the output of the motor. You can work and get other batteries, HMI, connectivity devices. So there's other systems which give us way more room to play with and customize everything according to the customer needs. Because at the end, it's a complete bike. Yeah, it's never just a motor or a battery or frame. It's the whole customer experience.
Sure. So on the Bosch system, do you get to control the calibration of the motor or not? Or is everything literally like off the shelf for that?
Yeah, so for the Bosch motor, everything is pretty much off the shelf. Yeah. There are some adjustabilities you can do in the app later on. But this is basically the same what every customer can do. Yeah. And on top of that, at least currently we are not doing any customization.
And then with the Shimano system, you get a few more options. So it is a little bit smaller from a package perspective, a little bit lighter as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit I think the dimension overall is not a lot smaller, but it's, say, a bit more favorable in terms of the shape of the motor. If you consider the whole system, it's for sure lighter than what you get with Bosch. And let's say the interfaces from the motor to the frame or from the battery to the frame. This is something which is also, a bit more easy to do a good frame design around the whole packaging compared to what you get from Bosch at the moment. And I think part of the reason is for Bosch, they are doing one system and it does need to fit every customer. It does need to fit the mountain biker, it does need to fit the urban biker. You need to fit it in a cargo bike, so it's all the same. Whereas there's some other manufacturers, smaller brands, which are able to do more customizing according to what you actually need as a customer.
Yeah, I guess there's ups and downs to both approaches, right? It's like the Apple versus Microsoft model. So everything in Apple is like a closed ecosystem, but the result is it tends to be quite robust. They have a lot of control over making sure everything integrates together and works together well. And then when you open everything up, it gives you more freedom to customize and get things exactly how you want them. But the risk that then comes is that if that integration isn't engineered well, then maybe it's not as robust. Maybe things don't communicate well or work together as they should. So I guess it opens up a lot of doors for you guys working in the Shimano ecosystem, but it also creates more challenges, I suppose, in that integration piece.
Exactly. More possibilities, but also more headache. Yeah, that's for sure how you would call it.
Yeah. And you guys have used your your own battery. You've designed your own battery to go with the Shimano system, which I think has enabled some of the, like the frame geometry. You can see the difference, not the geometry, I guess the frame form, the silhouette of the frame looks very different between the Shimano system and the Bosch system. Tell us just a little bit about what's gone into that, because that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, very, very interesting one, because if you are used to designing bikes, most likely you're not the expert for designing batteries. So this is for sure a risk you take, and quite a big one, and nothing you would just do in a few minutes. So definitely what we did in parallel is we teamed up a lot in our e-performance department. So I'm not the expert for the engine and for the batteries. So there's there's definitely other guys in Canon which can explain better. But definitely it's a big thing. Yeah, it's at the end it can be dangerous. Yeah, if you have a battery and it's exploding in your living room. Yeah, so this is for sure something you do not want as a customer. And so we had to team up with quality, team up with the right suppliers, team up with also external partners, experts for development of batteries in order to make it happen. And at the end it need to be safe. Yeah, so this is the biggest or the most important thing you have to consider when designing a battery. Yeah, but it did open up a lot of possibilities. Yeah. So if you look at the frame design, it's more, it's more slim. The packaging, so let's say the volume compared to weight, what we have with those batteries is really, really good. It's one of the best ones on the market. And the interface to the frame is very, very neat. And if you look at it, for example, it's a plastic housing. And why is it a plastic housing? Because it's covered in a big and strong carbon tube. So the carbon tube is then protecting the battery. Whereas if you do one system, which need to fit all kind of frame designs, like what it is on a Bosch, for example, you have a aluminum housing, which is very, very strong. So our battery, you could not assemble externally, with the risk of, let's say, stones hitting the battery. But since ours is integrated in the frame 100% all the time, we are able to save significant numbers of weight.
Yeah, and that's enabled you to get up to that 900 watt hour size as well, which is pretty incredible. Like the range on those big batteries is mind blowing, really. Yeah,
it's massive. And if you look at the bike from the side, it's not a huge down tube, considering we have 900 watt hours in there. It was a challenge in terms of packaging, definitely. So basically the battery is running all the way from the bottom bracket, like almost in the head tube for the small frame sizes. And trying to do something like this with the goal that it's going to fit in a mountain bike, in an urban bike, in a cargo bike, it's just impossible. Yeah, you have to customize it according to a certain product, and this is where you can really do cutting edge technology.
Yeah. And I guess that battery is having a huge impact on the weight distribution of the bike, which is in turn going to have a big impact on the way the thing rides. Like, is there a lot of focus on that side of things?
Yeah, it's the heaviest part actually on the bike. It's even heavier than the frame, to be honest. Definitely, we have been trying. So already, many years ago, but we're constantly pushing, like what's available and how potentially we can improve there. We did experiment quite a lot with position of batteries, like having it on the top of the down tube. We were actually also hanging it on the bottom of the down tube. We're trying to move it a little bit up and down because, maybe the most common approach would be to have everything as centralized and as low as possible. But you could also look into weight distribution, to have the weight distributed evenly on the bike and on the frame, whereas centralized would mean everything would be around the BB area. And what does it do in terms of how the bike is riding? So imagine having a very light having an e-bike which is very light in the front, it would probably be very easy to lift the handlebar if you want to do bunny hop. But then you would lift the handlebar, but the rear would never come up. Yeah. But whereas if you have like a more balanced weight distribution, it would maybe require a little bit more effort to pull the bars, but then at the same time it would be way more easy to lift the rear end of the bike as well. So at the end, it's about finding the right compromise and the right balance. So I think not everything around the BB is not always the best, if you ask me.
Yeah, and is that a benefit of having the open system that Shimano offer? Like you can control battery shape, which in turn like controls the weight distribution.
We can control the battery shape. So for example, if you have the big battery from the 900 watt hour, like what I mentioned, it goes almost all the way into the head tube. But if you have the smaller one, it's just shorter. So the top section is just shorter. If you look at the Bosch from the other way around, so if you have a slide-in battery on the Bosch, and if you want to change between the small and the big battery, so then what you have to do is you need to add a spacer to fit the shorter battery into the same dimension of the bigger one. And this spacer is actually close to the motor. So what you do with the Bosch is you have a lot of weight on the top and in the front, and you actually reduce the weight around the motor, which is not what you would like to do if you want to keep the weight as centralized as possible. Yeah. So
interesting.
Also, it's not like good and bad. There are some, advantages, disadvantages, depending like how you use it and for which customer you're doing the product. But there's more possibilities with open systems for sure.
And do the batteries have any impact on frame stiffness? Like they're obviously fixed into the frame relatively rigidly, and they're a long, stiff unit. Like do they impact the stiffness of the bike overall?
Actually, you could, but they don't. So if you would have a big aluminum housing, for example, what you see on the Bosch in-tube batteries. As an engineer, you could use this part to actually stiffen up the frame. But it's something which you should not do because having the battery as a, let's say, a frame member, and then it's very, very hard to control. So
I'm guessing there's a lot of risk inherent in that.
So what's affecting the stiffness more is then the shape you would require in order to fit the battery, for example. So it's a difference if you have like a big round tube or a rather slim and wide tube. So this is what is affecting the stiffness a bit more.
Okay, that makes sense. So how should people be thinking about battery choice? Because often there's a choice when you're getting an e-bike. Obviously, you can compare different e-bikes and look at the watt-hour number of the battery, but also if you're buying a specific bike, sometimes they have a large and a small battery option. Like, how should people be thinking about what to go for? Because there's positives and negatives to both, I guess.
I think first thing is more is not always more. I think a lot of customers they see it like this, but if you ask me, you should be honest with yourself. You should ask yourself whether you want to do shuttle laps on the bike basically, and therefore require as much capacity as possible, or potentially you're a light rider, you do not go out for 4 hours 5 hours rides on the weekend, and there you would, so as long as you get along with the smaller battery, you for sure get the better handling. And this is also what you see with light e-bikes at the moment. So they have small batteries, they have small motors, and on the same time, they are riding almost like normal bikes. So it's definitely depending on what you want, what you are doing on a regular basis. So definitely it's easy just to ask for a bigger capacity, just to be safe. But it's not necessarily the best thing for everyone. And I think people starting to realize also.
You want to kind of go as small as you can that fits for your riding needs, like the way you want to use the bike.
And you still want to have like 10-15% safety margin, because you do not want to end up on the trail without any battery.
Yeah, very true. What about the differences between the Bosch and the Shimano motor systems? Do you think like one might suit a certain type of rider or certain style of riding more than the other? Like I've used both, and I don't know, I personally find the Bosch a little bit more simple and maybe almost a bit more intuitive. Like it feels quite obvious in what it's doing, and it's got a huge amount of power, obviously. The Shimano motor seems a little bit more like it's thinking and like interpreting what your legs are doing and then creating an output from that. There seems to be a bit more of almost a disconnect between the input and the output there. Do you have certain views on the two different systems and how they might fit?
Yeah, so it's not black and white, I would say. So, I mean, we do have the Bosch on the race bike, yeah, because in terms of power output, it's the benchmark at the moment. But in terms of riding style, I think for some riders it might actually be easier to use the Shimano because the power output is not as harsh as it is with the Bosch. So at least in the stock settings, I think the Bosch with the app, you're also able to fine tune that in a certain direction. So if you want a mountain bike which does ride like a mountain bike and not like an e-bike with plenty of power and all the time and full gas, then I would say Shimano is a very, very good choice, especially considering that you can get a significantly lighter bike. So again, it's about, do I want the full power? Yeah, or do I want a little bit lighter bike, let's say so.
Yeah. The Bosch is maybe a little bit more aggressive in its power delivery, perhaps. Like it's not that I wouldn't put someone who hasn't ridden an e-bike on it and stick it in the full power mode and let them get stuck in, because they're probably going to cause themselves some damage, right?
Have you tried the race?
You need to understand.
Have you tried the race motor from Bosch?
I haven't. No, I've not. Is it another level beyond?
Yeah.
So is it the CX Performance? Is that what they call it?
It's actually the CX Race. So it's a limited number for Bosch. So it's actually, you can get it in the high performance, with the highest level drive from us. So the Fabian Barrel Signature Edition. Yeah. And they actually did crank up the power output from the motor. And also, how's it called? Like the lag. So could basically stop pedaling and still the bike would continue to ride for another 10 meters almost. And if you're not used to it, if you do technical climbing, you actually have to use your rear brake as a clutch, to not go straight in a tight corner. So I think for racing, everybody is riding that motor. Yeah, it's what we need there, but looking at how a bike should ride, this is probably a bit over the top. This is more like mix between motorcycle and bike. So then again, it's about the question, okay, where do we want to draw the line? Are we building bikes or are we building motorcycles here? So probably,
very true.
If you ask me, this is where it should stop.
Yeah. Do you think we'll see more legislation on the racing side of things that will control some of that? Because it feels like a very unlevel playing field at the moment, really. Like you need to be on the Bosch system.
Yeah. So it will definitely require more rules in order to make everything fair. So looking at, in general, how the, let's say, laws for e-bikes are being written down with the average power output, basically, it doesn't say nothing about the maximum power output. And looking at racing and climbing, the maximum power output is actually what is the limiting factor. So for sure, you could say, okay, the maximum power output for e-bike races could be like 85 Newton meters, could be, or you would say you could adjust it to your body weight. So let's say the total system weight need to be, or you would have a certain power per total system weight, so your body weight plus bike, and this would need to be even, because at the moment definitely the smaller riders, they are in favor of the bigger ones, because the weight, the watts per kilogram is definitely on their side.
Yeah. Stacked in their favor. It'd be interesting to see how that changes. I wanted to talk a bit about the two more recent bikes that you guys have put out. There's the Strive On and the Talk On, which I've been lucky enough to ride a bit over the last couple of months. And on paper, they look pretty much like the same bike. When you look at the frame numbers, there's not a huge amount of discrepancy between them, but they've got very different, I think, intended uses and some subtle differences between the two bikes. I mean, they feel really, really different out on the trail. Can you talk us through a little bit like those two bikes and how they differ, what it is that makes them differ and what their intentions are?
Yeah, so in terms of geometry numbers, you're actually right. It's quite similar. So what is significantly different is the bottom bracket height. So on the Strive, it's significantly higher than on the Torque. And the reason why we're doing it is, if you do technical climbing, you need to have the ground clearance for your pedals in order to, go up the EWSE stages and win the races there. Whereas the Torque for us is it's a bike park bike. Yeah? So if you climb on the Torque, you probably go mellow. Yeah, you climb a fire road, climb the access road to a certain trail park. So you do see a lot of trail parks without lift access or without the need to shuttles. And this is where we actually see the Torque. It's the best terrain for the Torque.
Yeah, so it's like a shuttle. It's a self-uplift, basically.
A self-uplift downhill bike, if we would say it like this.
Yeah. What about the kinematic of the two bikes? Is there much difference between the two as a result of, again, that like race use versus like bike park use?
Yeah, it's actually very similar, to be honest. So what I was mentioning before with, more constant power output on the e-bike. So this is what we for sure took into notice for both of those bikes. But other than that, the Torque does come with more travel. So it's not a pure downhill bike, but if you look at bike parks nowadays, few people are riding pure downhill bikes. So let's say the freeride bike, which is still possible to pedal, or like a super enduro, this is the go-to bike for most of the guys going in the bike park. And this is also what the Torque is for us. And at the end, it's nice. You're pedaling up with your friends rather than loading up everything into an old crappy shuttle van, burning a lot of diesel on the uphill. Yeah, it's way nicer on the e-bike.
Yeah, do you think things are going to go that way? Like, there's lots of talk around racing of like, certainly in the UK, all of our racing uses like basically diesel Land Rovers to shuttle people up the hills, which is like a less and less cool thing to do. Basically, it's not very environmentally friendly. Chairlifts, I assume, are better, but they have the downsides as well. Certainly the cost and the damage to put them in the first place. Do you think we're going to start seeing like e-bike as a replacement for uplift? Do you think that's a viable solution?
Yeah, I think if you want to go full gas the whole day, if you go to Morzine, if you want to ride plein air laps, you're not going to replace the uplift there. But if you look at places like Finale, for example, few years ago, there was, shuttle the whole day up and down. Whereas now if you go on the base, Finale outdoor shuttle base, you see many riders with e-bikes just shuttling up once. So they get up once in the morning, and the rest they are just doing by bike with the help of the battery, and they can spend the whole day in the mountain. Have a great time. Have a gelato and the beer around the beach, and everyone is happy. Whereas a couple of years ago, you would have to go full gas with the shuttle van the whole day. So I think you already see, quite a change there. And on top of that, on trail parks without lift access, you see, at least here in Germany, you see many e-bikes at the moment. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the compromises of having an e-bike for that sort of riding are becoming less and less, right? And to some extent, there's even the benefits, like we were saying earlier. The kinematic can be a better kinematic for the descending as a result of some of the things that e-bikes offer. Do you think that will continue? Do you think we'll get e-bikes will just get better and better at doing that?
Yeah, I think because the e-bike market is a growing market. Everyone's investing a lot there. You for sure will see a lot of progress in there. But it doesn't mean like that you can still have a lot of fun without motor. Yeah, we are talking about e-bikes. But I also do see which is kind of interesting. Like within the company, it's very, very, everybody is able to have the new bikes, brand new bikes all the time, without the need to show off. Okay, I have the new Specialized, or I have the new YT, or I have the new Canyon. So everybody just gets what is fitting the most for the personal needs. A lot of people actually, they go back. So they did have tried e-bikes for a few years, and they enjoy the riding without taking care about the battery all the time. So I think it's not gonna be black and white. I think there's significant room for both motorized and non-motorized bikes for sure. And will see some improvements on both sides, but probably on e-bikes it's going faster than on traditional ones.
I guess there's just like we're less mature in the e-bike side of things than we are in the normal mountain bike side of things, right? There's progress is easier to make in those earlier years of the technology.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's going to be some very interesting years to come. Next 3, 4, 5 years, I think a lot of things are going to change in the market. So definitely post-COVID, a lot of things are changing. So going to be super interesting what happens. Yeah, never know. I don't know either. We'll see. Only time will tell us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to talk a little bit about durability and the testing side of things with these, because they're a very different thing from a normal bike, a lot heavier, a lot more going on with them. What sort of stuff do you do that you wouldn't obviously be doing with a normal bike? What kind of testing takes place to make sure these things are robust?
Yeah, so definitely one big change or one big difference is that on an e-bike, considering you're going out for the same time, you would put in significantly more amount of kilometers or descent meters. Maybe not being compared to cross-country bikes, but definitely if you compare a trail bike to a trail e-bike, so this is a difference. So thinking you're going to own it for 10 years, the bike, you would for sure, just go further distance and higher altitude. So this is something we have to take into account when testing. And the other thing is the torque of the motor. So again, it's not black and white. So the torque you see on the chain, on the frame is a higher one, but the amplitude is a smaller one. So at the end, it's questionable whether it's tougher on the frame if you have an e-bike compared to non-motorized bike. But there are some fine differences. And obviously, you have heavy components on the bike. So you have a heavy battery, which is being mounted to the frame. And, you crash when you ride a bike. So you need to make sure that, for example, the battery is not coming out of the frame or something like this. Yeah, so there's a few more things you need to take into account when testing an e-bike, which you wouldn't have done before.
Yeah. And you're on your website, you give these levels that the bikes are kind of approved to, and the Strive On and the Torque On are different in that respect. So the Strive On is like a 4E approved bike, and the Torque On is a 5E approved bike. I'm assuming the E stands for e-bike. But can you explain a bit about like what that system is, like what's different between 4 and 5?
Exactly. So this is basically showing the customer the intended use of the bike. So condition 5 for us is you can go full gas basically downhill racing. So if you look at the Sender, the bikes which are being raced in the Downhill World Cup, they are tested according to this testing standard. So you could take Troy Brosnan, for example, put him on a Torque On, and he would go down Val di Sole World Cup track, race speed. Probably would not go the same time at the end, but it would not be any problem, to make it down. I'm not saying you can't do it on a Strive, but probably if you case a landing a few times too often, it's just not what the bike is being made for. Yeah, so Strive, this is the bike where you go to Finale, for example, where you do EWS races, but it's not the, let's say, 60K average, 20 meters plus or hardline jumps or whatever. So this is not what you would like to do on this bike. But if you have condition 5, you can do all those World Cup racing and rampage stuff for sure.
Okay, so superhumans can ride a 5 e-bike, basically.
Yeah, I'm never going to break it. If you case a landing in hardline, probably you can also destroy a condition 5 bike. But then again, this is...
I think, you can just destroy yourself pretty quickly, I reckon, as well.
If you go full gas in a tree, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you, on the Strive you have this on the Strive normal bike, you have the shapeshifter technology, which like moves the bike down in travel. So if you're climbing or you've got a long pedal, you can flick the shapeshifter. You've not used that on the Strive which I thought was kind of interesting. Is there a reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so for sure part of the reason is that you have a lot of power output on the e-bike. And if you do not have a motor, you do not have this, let's say, oversupply of power. It's for sure something we looked into quite a lot. And as you know, we're working very closely with our athletes. I think here also Fabian, he was trying a lot of different things. So we're trying a lot of different things with him. And at the end, we were saying, okay, the better compromise is to have it not on the bike as it is currently. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, we are always constantly pushing the borders, the technologies, and So might not be available at the moment, but the future, you never know.
We might see Fabian with some kind of extra button on his handlebars at some point by the sounds of it. So where do you see this whole gravity sector going? And we talked about it potentially replacing uplift shuttles, but it feels like the racing side of things now it's at that world level. It's gonna, as a result of that, it's gonna grow. More and more people are gonna see it. We've got e-bikes becoming way more accepted, I think. So many more people have them now. Most people who've swung their leg over one either own one now or really want to own one. We're seeing a lot of pros, if they're not racing them, they're using them for training. They're a good tool in that side of things. Where do you see this whole gravity sector going?
Yeah, that's a good one. Only time will tell us. So e-bikes, if you look in the forest, if you go to Finale, so many people riding e-bikes now, so it's hard to imagine that it's going to be even more. So hard to say. I think at some point, there's going to be, it need to level up somewhere. So I think this year, for example, in Germany, I think it's going to be the break-even point where there's going to be more e-bikes sold than bikes without an e-bike.
Really?
So definitely there was a hockey stick development in e-bike sales, but I mean it cannot go on like this forever. So if you ask me within the next 2 or 3 years, I think it's gonna, nobody knows, but probably we're gonna come to a point where it's actually gonna level itself.
Where do you see, from a technology side of things, we have these trends of things getting lighter, smaller, cheaper, across many sectors, not just in the bike industry. Do you think that there's much room within e-mountain bikes for that to happen? Or do you think people are still pushing for more power? Do you think power levels are kind of where they should be now and we'll see a reduction in size and weight and stuff? Which direction do you think that'll all go in?
I think in power we are almost over the peak now, with what I mentioned before, with having the race motor, CX race motor from Bosch. If you ask me, it's probably too much for a mountain bike. So definitely smaller motors, because the motors we now have, they have huge power output. And if you look at how most of people actually using those products, they hardly use all the power what a racer would actually use. So seeing smaller systems, seeing smaller, lighter batteries, hopefully also seeing prices coming down, because if you think about a big motor with a lot of power and a small motor with few power, if you ask me, the smaller one with few power should be the cheaper one. But looking at the price tags at the moment, sometimes it's the opposite way. So I think there's going to be also some improvements, some more competitive prices in that segment coming up also as well. So for us, it's important also to have, great products on the entry level price point. And I think some e-bikes, they are more expensive than they could be, and I think we are also pushing in a direction which is good for the customer at the end.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And for customers that are looking at the Strive and the Torque, like how would you differentiate between the two? Like how would you try and help send people in the right direction between those two bikes?
Yeah, so for the Torque, if you ride a bike park, if you have a local bike park, if you do not mind or if you do not want to do technical climbing and push yourself on the most tricky uphill, then probably the Torque is the better bike. But if you want to do racing, if you want to challenge yourself with potentially also building some crazy uphill trail, which you never managed to do before, then Strive would be the go-to bike.
Yeah. Are you seeing much of that in the German market? Are people starting to build like gnarly uphills? It's not something I've seen here yet.
You don't see. You need to go to Nice. You need to go to Fabian. He's going to show you some more stuff.
He's always been one step ahead, or more than one step ahead. Hey, so maybe it will be the next thing people build in techie uphills. But
no, it's for sure. It's a thing. Yeah, you see it in racing, and if this becomes more popular, and maybe a little bit like riding trials. Yeah, you also see Danny McGaskill or Fabio Wittmer. Those guys bring in a new kind of riding style into mountain bike. Also, this kind of techie trials riding segment is going to become more popular probably. You see some motor trials rider actually on e-bikes, and they are pushing in a certain direction which you haven't seen from mountain bike riders before. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it's always awesome to see what Chris Ackera can do on an e-bike as well. Like seeing them ridden in that way is quite refreshing. Like it's cool to see people finding different ways to use these things.
So if you have more people on e-bike, more riders, definitely I think you would see a couple of trails popping up. There are some trails here which used to be popular downhill trails, like maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, but they are not being ridden that much because they are not super flowy. They might have some awkward tight turns, and those trails actually they are being rediscovered now from e-bikes again and being used for uphill trails because it's more fun than just climbing the fire road. It's a challenge as well. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, e-bikes make uphill fun again, which is unusual. Like I've sort of forgotten about uphill riding. You always want to find the easiest way to the top, but when you're on an e-bike, you don't look at it in the same way, do you? There's a challenge to be had and some fun there. So
3 hours, 4 hours on an e-bike, you are mentally done.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good stuff, man. Well, it's been really interesting chatting and finding out a bit more about what you guys have been up to in getting those new gravity e-bikes out there. Before we sign off, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. If people are looking to work in the bike industry, have you got any advice you'd give? Like you've obviously been involved for a good few years now. Like what would you say to people that want to get into the bike industry in some way?
So I think for us, it's super important that, you need to be in the sport. You need to be in the market. You need to know everything about bikes. Basically, it's part of the lifestyle. So it's not just a job. You actually have to live mountain bike or you have to live road bike. And because this is something you cannot learn. So you can go to university, you can learn engineering, you can learn business, management, whatever, but you cannot learn, the passion for bikes. So if you bring this, if you keep on pushing for your dream, then I would say anything is possible.
Nice. Good advice, man. And if people want to check out the bikes, where's the best place for them to be looking?
Check out the bikes on canyon.com for sure.
Good stuff. All right. I'll stick a link in the show notes so people can find that. But yeah, thanks, Moritz. It's been fun to catch up and I look forward to seeing what's next from you guys, because I'm sure there's more stuff in the
Definitely
works.
exciting times. Thank you very much, Chris, for having me, for giving the opportunity to chat here. It's been great fun, and hope to talk to you soon.